Welcome to the Claims Underground podcast with your hosts, Corey Locke and Troy Willis, where we help policyholders just like you understand your policy and how to navigate through an insurance claim. We advocate for homeowners as well as businesses when insurance companies won't pay. So if you're tired of getting the runaround and ready to find out what's really going on, then let's get down to business and learn from the insurance claims experts, Corey Locke and Troy Willis.
Good evening. This is Claims Underground. Today's show is about your estimate is too low and where to look. Myself, Troy Willis. I am a licensed public adjuster and umpire and appraisal is certified. I am a 30-year retired builder. I have been in the insurance industry for more than 30 years, and I am also an expert witness. My co-host here today is Corey Locke, and let him introduce himself and give his credentials. You got the floor, Corey? Go for it.
Yeah, I do. Welcome, Claims Underground. Corey Locke here. Been 35 years as an insurance adjuster. I'm an expert witness, also an estimator of contents and property, IICRC triple mastered, ACAC smoke and fire expert, and I've been around since we were handwriting estimates, and now we don't do that any longer. So just to date myself a little bit, and I had an adjuster say, "How long have you been doing this?" Well, I've been writing estimates in triple carbons, so we've gone a long ways from there. But guys, tonight, guys, tonight we got this title because of things that are happening right off the presses today. And so your estimate is too low, where to look. I mean, this really came up from Troy's interaction with a couple of big carriers that we just started noticing some stuff that was off. And we're going to tell you tonight where to look for where it is off, and maybe what you could need to start contemplating where to go with it. So, Troy, where did you start seeing something go sideways on one of your claims? I think this was someone you were helping personally, and it just kind of something that jumped out at you.
Absolutely. It's actually my uncle of mine, my wife's father, uncle out in Florida. And what's going on is, I've noticed this problem in California before. I won't speak of which company did it, but I noticed there was a large loss that I worked on that they was trying to prevent paying the homeowner maybe about $400,000 of money they owed him. And I submitted my estimate, of course, and they was trying to, conflict with it, basically saying it took, only 2 or 3 months to build a house out here in California. It never happened. And they reduced the cost down a lot. So it made me start kind of really looking at the estimate. So what I did was, some told me, because some of the numbers look funny, write a comparable using the same price guide as they did. And we all got the same program. So everyone knows we all use this Xactimate program to write these estimates. And so it gives you a price list by the month and the year of that particular zip code area of what they believe the price to be to do these repairs based upon different reports from multiple contractors. And they take this data and they compile it and make these changes every couple months for an updates. So I plugged into their data and I actually plugged in every line item that they put in there, not missing a one.
So you took their estimate and you mirrored it. You put the same
mirrored it exactly,
same size, same line items, same everything.
Okay. There was a problem. So I looked at the bottom line numbers, same thing, and there was a huge problem. There was $99,000 in difference that they had shaved off of the numbers because they had reduced the actual estimate program number. They gave them a unit cost. They reduced it down because they knew insurance couldn't see this, lower than what the program told them they owed for. And this is what's happening today with my uncle's claim, whereas they actually took his claim, they took the items that was damaged and they reduced them down by all a percentage. They just kind of did a factoring over them. So that way, when you can do the mirror image to the estimate, here's the example, the roofing tile on what the real price guide is based on that date and loss was $299 a square foot. After the insurance company reduced it where they thought no one would see it, it is now $269.39. That's $30 a square plus that you're stealing from somebody, and it's 28 square of roof on there.
It's a bit of money. It's a bit of money that they're shaving.
And that's on one item, keeping in mind, every item was shaved Unfortunately, the Ridge Vent, where it was 107, was now reduced to $54. And again, someone wouldn't know this other than thinking the insurance company pays this amount. So they're taking the estimate that they've been using for now the last 20 years. They're manipulating the estimate to show less in costs than what it's supposed to be, even though the program is telling them what it is.
So let's show our viewers where we would find the database. Now, this is an Xactimate estimate. This is the front page of the Xactimate estimate where it says price list. This is Florida, and I
Florida price
think
list.
Florida price list 8X is where they're listed.
Correct.
October of 2022. This is where they're going to find it. Now, what you're describing, based upon my experience, is a customized Xactimate price list. They have taken the price list for that time and put a different name next to it, and then basically said, we're going to customize this. It's not the price list it's the price list that originates on a download from Xactimate, but they've customized it, and they have to call it something else slightly different than what
Well,
Xactimate calls it.
actually, the deception of it was they actually left it as the same price list, but what they did
No.
was they did a global factor over the estimate line items to make it change. And so it reduced it by that percentage. So it all looks like apples to apples. And
Oh, they
nobody
didn't
was
even.
looking for it. Slickest thing to ever
So
do. I have
they
to tell
did it. So they took the price line and did a global downgrade
you.
of
Accurate. Yes,
cost.
sir.
They factored the materials or they factored the labor on a global downgrade.
At a
Eh,
certain
That
percentage, it dropped it. Yeah.
that's a slick way to hide things.
Because you would think, again, if one was looking at it from the front, as we just displayed on this screen, that you look at your price list, you would see that they have a price list for that particular area. They would still read October 22nd. However, the numbers will be different, which they are, unfortunately. So it was the way. And again, we understand the customized price list because
Mhm.
I remember when you spoke to Exactomate and they showed us how to create one, because Exactomate has a disclosure that in the beginning of the program when you buy it and purchase it is a disclosure in the representation of warranty section that talks about this, that they don't accept any liability for pricing, and these pricing is basically used as their pricing is a placeholder, and it's the responsibility of whomever with this program to verify pricing. So it's already a two-sided sword, because the insurance company is saying this is what the industry pricing is. Well, that's not true. That's not clearly what the program says, but they won't share that with the consumers. And then you turn around and manipulate the price by taking all of the numbers and applying a percentage to decrease it globally. So no one see you change the price list. Is that not a huge problem? Because
It,
where is the fairness? And it's unreal. You can't see that.
Too often we've heard from adjusters working inside the carriers when we make the argument that your price for that unit price is wrong, and here's the reason why. It's not $25 an hour. This person is actually $45 an hour. We've proven that. This is the statistical data from the California Department of Labor, and the response we get was, I can't change anything in Xactware. I can't change the pricing in Xactware. They don't allow me to change the pricing in Xactware. Well, let's take a pause on that. If you can't change it as an adjuster, where is that being changed? Now, sometimes you do have, administrative rights that are not yours to change, because I was on the inside, and there are some limitations of all carriers, of all programs do have administrative rights, and you might not be able to, take things out. But quite honestly, where is the fairness in the fact that they can't correct an incorrect price, but they can take and downgrade globally a price to save money?
Which, when you think about this is per line of every estimate that walks through that door. So even though you are not only lowballing this insured, now you're just plain ripping them off because you're taking money they already are entitled that you lowball. And it's unfortunate because in this program, when we write these estimate people, what happens is it gives you a choice of the type of standard of the material or the work being done, being standard grade. There'll be something that is just the line item itself, which is above standard. Then you'll have a high grade. Sometimes you'll have a premium grade and custom grade. Sometimes, and so carriers know that these have different price levels at each one of them. So if there's already a price level dictated for that particular unit price, where do they got the right to come in, reduce that cost where you can't see it, and then they'll argue with us going, this is the price that the program kicked out and we won't pay no more. It's the vendor situation all over again. The vendor price is just this, and that's what our expert says, but you don't tell the consumer that you gave the vendor guidelines and what they couldn't put in their estimate that
Right.
you're going to make fightable later on. So it's the disadvantage is so often between the estimate section of it or advocating for it. I mean, that's the conflict that I believe that's the problem today with these estimates. Vendors write low estimates and then they say, hey, this is what you can do it for the job. The consumer can't find anyone for that price. And then if you say, okay, well, give it to the consumer, give it to the vendor to do. We'll take the program vendor from the carrier. Well, let's look at how he gonna do it. Well, he's gonna basically show how he was right and this guy you got was so wrong, and then he's going to start the job. Excuse me, and then he's going to have a whole lot of supplementals. It's going to be probably more than what your guy started with, and that's how they're going to walk it out. But if they were told that you're going to have to lock this bid in that this vendor gave you, and that vendor's got to say, I'm going to give it a lock bid. I'm not going to have any supplementals. Put it all on the table. You want it all. I want his bond, his license. I want his professional insurance. I want to see. I want all this. Now you lock the job in. Let's see what happens with that. He ghost. He ain't calling back. He too busy. He's not gonna do any of that because he's not gonna put himself in that situation. But
Right.
they're forcing customers to have to live with these low estimates. So if I was the customer coming to you as a PA, what do I say? How do I get around this, Mr. Locke? What do I do? Because what if they're doing this to me?
You're going to have to probably consult with a professional. It's going to have to be a professional public adjuster that actually estimates. Make sure that this is a question you ask. Not all public adjusters estimate. There's no requirement for it, but we're finding more and more of our brethren that don't necessarily estimate themselves. So that's the first question. Are you an estimator, and can you tell me more about this? If they can't, then okay, well, I appreciate your time. The next one to talk to is a professional estimator. These are likely the guys that the other public adjusters who don't write estimates hire. So, you
You ain't
know,
want to say it was us, but okay, go ahead.
we don't want to
Go through that
self-aggrandize.
story.
But we do write estimates on the side. Oh yeah, and we write them for other people. So, but you're going to have to talk to a professional, and the professional is going to first look at, are all the rooms there? Are they using the right pricing guide? Are they applying the correct measurements for an area? That's the first look. The second look is, it's pretty easy. I'm either looking for a general conditions area or a main area. And sometimes, a guy that hasn't been writing estimates that long just use the main area. And the main area just means the main dwelling. And in that main area, that's supposed to be all the area requirements to do the job. And what do I mean by that? To do the job, you have to have a safe environment. You have to have supervision. You have to have toilets. You have to have hand wash stations. You have to have dumpsters. You have to have supervisorial cleanup every day. Otherwise, you won't have a safe site. All of these are extra things that are put in addition to the rooms. It's something that's not being taught. It's a blind area for all new adjusters. And if you're a new adjuster, you need to look at how are you going to supervise this job if you don't pay money for supervision? It's not something that is magically there. There are no Keebler elves that show up, during the job. There are no pixies that at night clean. These are all things you add for. And the arguments that we've had in recent weeks, and I had this argument, professionally. When I say argue, we professionally discuss and we, say our positions, and we say, "Well, I disagree, and here's the reason why." And you always go back to what is the intent of the program, and the program will tell you its intent by what we call white papers. Exactimate has put out a lot of white papers. The most recent one is by, when Exactimate changed their name to Verisk, they put out a white paper in 2021 talking about, as far as the program's concerned, we don't roll everything into a unit price. And that's the argument we get. Supervision is in a unit price. Oh, well, overhead and profit is in a unit price. Oh, well, all the things you asked for OSHA are in a unit price. Let's be very clear here. Overhead and profit on a unit price that's discussing plumbing is for overhead and profit of the plumber, not overhead and profit of the general contractor that oversees it. Overhead and profit that they can say is part of the unit price for painting, that's for the painter. So he makes money. So he covers his costs. That's how a unit price works. Where the contractor has to come in is under either general conditions or main for the estimate. So you're looking for that. Find those two areas. And more than likely, you're going to have a main area that has one item, a dumpster. And that's where you're going to look to and say, how does he supervise the job? How do I know that I won't get sued for injuries to a worker on my site due to OSHA? That guys, you got to look at your homeowner's liability, and where does it say, are you responsible for injuries to workers on your site? And the answer is yes. So if you're not, paying attention and asking the contractor, I want you to list your completion bond here. I want you to list your general liability if it's not enforced. I want you to list workers' compensation, and maybe you want to be listed as an additional indemnified party. If you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of repair, guess what? You want to be listed as an additional indemnified party under any one of those insurance policies. That way you're protected. You also want to know, are they supervising this job? This is a big push out here in the West, and only people are starting to wake up to this idea that, pursuant to Exactimate's white paper, well, overhead and profit is not the catch all of everything. Overhead doesn't mean all the requirements of the site. In order for the site to work correctly and safely, pursuant to OSHA, which means you have to have a safe environment for your workers to operate within, that's your obligation. Then they have to supervise. They have to have safety gear. They have to have a bathroom. They have to have, probably heat exhaustion tents, and also fans and water and a fire extinguisher and a first aid kit. I'm not sure if they have to have a defibrillator, but it's not a bad idea. Um, all of these hard hats, you have to have, quite honestly, you have to have masks. You have to have uh, gloves. You have to have all the requirements to keep workers safe. That's the requirement of a contractor. If you're not seeing that on their estimate, you will likely never get a contractor to say that's enough money, because you're cutting out 30% of an estimate right there by not including all the job supervisions and job site safety, which the adjusters are being taught that that is included in a unit price, and it's not.
What
And
about confined spaces, which I know
well,
this
yeah,
as I'm saying, we know that they leave that out all the time on purpose. But
yeah.
explain how that confined space place
So,
may.
so under OSHA guidelines, confined spaces mean that if you're working in a crawl space or an attic space, that the employee or that the worker has to have two points of exit, a rapid exit. They have to be within, I think, 2 or 3 seconds of an exit if something goes sideways. Or you're having direct supervision, and that person's on a tether. And that I think I heard that someone was explaining to me in a different state that they had to be within a 2 second touch of their employee. So if you got a guy in a crawl space working to either take out insulation or put in insulation, you got a daisy chain of workers in that crawl space. If you have to have a 2 second touch of a worker in a confined space because there's only one way in and one way out, you got that person on a tether, you got another person behind him, you got another person behind them, you got a supervisor behind them. I Hey, confined space is no joke. I saw that in the state of Washington. Heck, in confined spaces, they define it. They want a fire department on site.
Wow.
So, in a,
It's serious.
yeah, are they taking care of fall protections? OSHA has a requirement for fall protections. Anything over 6 feet, you have to have a fall protection. I had some people in a discussion among professionals. Is it something we need to add for harnesses for fall protection? The answer is yes. We have to add for that. It's a requirement. Do we have to add for other safety gear for them to work in confined space? The answer is yes, because it's a requirement of the job site. Let's not make this something that we misunderstand. Overhead is for the contractor to manage his desk and his copy machine. That's overhead. That 10% or whatever percent of that is in the estimate when it says overhead is to manage stuff that's not at the job site. To manage stuff at the job site is specifically line item and put into the estimate. So uh, where it's low, it will always be right there.
Somebody
And
has to pay for that contractor's office, and somebody
oh
got to
yeah,
pay for all that equipment and secretaries and everything that functions a job, to be a business.
but that overhead of 10% takes care of everything that's not on site. That's all the
Correct.
stuff that's away from his site. Uh, I had someone that said, "Well, our next should we be paying for them to bring a hammer or bring a screwdriver or bring a paintbrush?" Let's just stop right there.
Oh no, I'm not arguing
Those, I mean, I mean, it's a reasonable thing to say because maybe some people have a misunderstanding. So let's unpack that. Is the hammer, screwdriver, or paintbrush part of the trade by which that employee is working? And the
that.
answer is yes. They use a hammer, they use a screwdriver, they use a paintbrush. Those are the equipment of the trade.
That's right.
But what's not an equipment of the trade is a mask, a respirator, a hard hat. It might be safety gloves. It might be harnesses to be supported on a three-story building. None of those things are things that are mandated to paint a wall, but they're mandated by OSHA that the worker be safe while they painted the wall. That's the difference.
Right. That's right. Because as any profession, especially as you speak of painters, NIOSHA even dictate what type of mask that needs to be used. And
Right.
if you went into any Home Depot or Lowe's and you see this, like, it kills me because people really don't pay attention to this. You got to know this. You see like 30 or 40 different kind of masks. And then you look for the cheapest mask. Let me grab the cheapest mask. I'm not going to pay $12 for a mask. And this was $3. It looks the same, but it doesn't serve the same purpose, and it
Right.
doesn't filter microns the same, and it's set for that. It's not for paint. Every N95 mask is not going to be for just everything. You can't use N95 for asbestos painting and everything else that you would do insulation. They all particularly got a purpose, and NIOSHA has their actual specifications to these type of masks that actually have to be used for construction. And so, and OSHA plays that part of enforcing that rule of those particular type of masks. As
Mhm.
we dealt with COVID for the longest, COVID is still here. It's back. It's increasing again. We into a tridemic now, I believe it, whatever they call it. But and
Mhm.
here's the case: as an epidemic and pandemic contractor, over the last few years since COVID started, one of the things I learned doing this, and we've done this many times with claims, is that not outside of the protective gear you got to don and doff, you still need a place that's a decom center to do so, which you have
Right.
to build outside the property of the structure for people to come enter in and a place to exit off. And somebody has to be there to help them assist with donning and doff this gear to protect from contamination. So although they don't feel this essential, but let's look at what it really is, because there's been law that's been passed about protective gear out here, and still insurance companies were still ignoring it. They still tell us sometimes it's over. Is it over?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's not over because now we have permanent rules out in California that employers have to pay for sick leave. They have to pay for testing. They have to pay for medical records checking. They also have to pay for monitoring the air that's in any workspace. That's an obligation that's still in place. That in a confined, not even a confined space, in a workspace, you have to monitor the air. So if you see an estimate that you have a lot of indoor work and they don't have an air scrubber, that an air scrubber, scrubs 1,000 square feet, that air scrubber is going to need to be there during the time of the construction. And if you're not changing out the filter every 30 days, then you're not following the requirements of OSHA. If you're not decontaminating that air scrubber, we're not even talking about mitigation. We're just talking about doing the hammer and nails and all the other things that go back to putting it in. That air scrubber has to be there for the entire length of the job. So does a well marked and specifically area delineated area for a fire extinguisher, for a first aid kit. All of these, if you have 3 floors of a building, what do you think
Each
you're going to have
floor,
to have? You're going to
each
have to
floor.
have each floor has to have a fire extinguisher, and has to have a first aid kit, and has to have an air scrubber. These are just the requirements of the job. This is not, magical overhead, all that's all included. No, it's part of a specific job site requirement. So that's money. What about what about the fact that we get this all the time for the adjuster? They say, well, we're going to save that fixture. We're going to remove that fixture, sink, faucet. We're going to save it, and we're going to reinstall it. And that's part of what we want to adjust for. We're going to replace the cabinet, or replace the countertop. We're going to save that fixture. Where does that fixture go? Where does that go? Is it magically, elevated to be in the yard? Well, we've seen that. Is it stuck in someone's garage? That's improper, because why are you taking up their
Absolutely.
garage space? Where are they going to put it? Well, are they going to put it in a pod on site? That's probably reasonable, a beginning part of reasonability. Are they going to put a fence around that property? Depends on the area. I would say probably yes. A
Are they
fence
gonna
is,
protect
yeah,
the material they took
yeah.
loose?
Where does all the material go? Does the material just magically show up with pixies, or does the material get stored on site? I mean, the classic example we will talk about. You had a winery that you were estimating that was obliterated. Was
Yeah,
obliterated by a fire.
that was a
And when
lot
I
of
say
material.
there was a lot of stone and materials, and
That's fact.
is that stored on site? Mm,
Mm,
$40 million
you know,
dollars
the
worth
answer
of
no, right.
repair.
You had no room on site. No, there's nowhere. And remember at first I said, "Well, hey, they got a big old warehouse," and you made me realize that, why do they gotta give up their warehouse? And that's that question. They don't have to give up their warehouse.
Just like they don't have to give up their garage to store their things. This is part of the
Exactly.
job. So in that case, you estimated for a separate warehouse that would be staffed, that would have equipment to onload and offload, would have a truck for delivery, that would have all the requirements of something that would take 18 months. I think it was 18 months to build. Maybe it was 24. But whatever it was to rent a full-size warehouse for all that material to come and and have personnel, and all the requirements of that was required for that job. It wasn't magically part of the overhead.
That's
So
right.
every job is evaluated as to the complexities of it. If you're taking things, and the insurance company wants to save them, fantastic. They need to be removed. They have to be wrapped in order to be safely stored. They need to be, when they come out, they have to be cleaned, and they got to be see if they're serviceable. But before any of that, it has to be put someplace. So if you're looking in your estimate and they're saying, well, we're going to save this, and we're going to save this, and we're going to save this, where is that all going to go? Well,
And
if
wrap it.
if there's no pod to store it, or a sea train, guess what? They're missing money. They're missing things. They're missing an understanding of how the job is complex. So
Mhm.
just like, supervision, that nothing gets magically done without someone supervising it or making sure that the work is done efficiently. I think we also need to talk about that a job site is inherently dangerous. It's inherently dangerous
Agree.
to limb and life. A job site is a dangerous place. And unless you're supervising that job, you will have a world of hurt that comes to your work comp side, or OSHA, or both.
Mhm.
It's a
I agree.
requirement of the Business and Professions Code, the state of California, and has been so for a long, long time, that you that you monitor and supervise your workers. You don't just send people out to go do stuff.
Well, I think there's not one corporation in this world, a real corporation. Let me step fast when I say corporations. People call themselves a corporation sometimes. Let's say there's not a real corporation out here that does not have a supervisor. Not one. I mean, there's nobody that works a job that, they don't have some kind of oversight if they work in a job for somebody. They're not working for themselves. So that means, again, they have an overseer at that point. We had a claim, but we still got a claim, but you got one of the adjuster's position was to me was that our management said that you have to provide an invoice from the supervisor that gave it to the company to get paid. And I had to, I did step out of the, we have to be professional, but I did. I stepped a little bit off the ledge a little when I called her plain stupid. I mean, you can't be that stupid. And then the real side of this is that you got an hourly job, less than $30 an hour, and you got management. You can't even make a decision. You got to take back what I just said in the email to your manager to get a response so she can tell you what to say to me. But you want these people to send someone out to this dangerous job site every day that people get hurt and killed for hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, and say, we don't think why would you hold supervision? It's not that complex. From someone who has never built a home, never swung a hammer, never built a doghouse. And why did they say that? Because they've been told to say that how many times? Like you're trained to say it's not complex. But then the magical question gets to be define complex for me. So we have a both understanding because I'm misunderstood in your definition of complex. And, as we know, and you just said it, how dangerous a job site is, wouldn't that be complex? That you'd have to go through certain measures to prevent people from getting harmed and hurt. So it's not a simple situation, or you would have to come up with a way to keep people safe. You just go to work every day, everybody do the job and so forth. But we know that's not rational. The workers don't carry the contractor's license. The workers don't carry the insurance. They're workers. The company carries it. That contractor carries it. So why shouldn't he protect himself under the business code that he's required to keep his bond, and then two, protect himself from liability because he's on a hook for whether it's construction defects or the warranty for the work itself.
Right.
What sense would that ever make? And then not to mention, it's even dictated by the law. The law actually has an assembly bill that talks about why 32 hours are required on these construction sites. And yet the carriers still come back and go, well, we don't think they still owe it though. We don't think so.
We don't like it because it's too much money.
Too much
I'm
money.
sorry. You're in a business of risk. That's your job. Pay money. You had to restore them to pre-loss condition. You had to pay what all costs are to restore them to pre-loss condition. It doesn't say leave open items until you give us a bill. It doesn't say that. Not at all. Not in California, but it gets interpreted for the convenience of the carrier to hold people hostage for their money, and then they have to do less than what they're owed. They have to get by with hiring someone that's not a general contractor or to just try to do it themselves and piecemeal it out. That's not appropriate. That's not that's a failure of the obligation to restore them to pre-loss condition for all costs that are required to restore them to pre-loss condition.
It's happening every day, though. Unfortunately, what you just
Every
brought to
claim,
the table is getting even
every
worse. And it's they're not restoring people like they're supposed to. They forced a lot of people into litigation, and from what we've seen, even in Florida with the whistleblower situation. I mean, it's so many things that they do, even though they, make you feel like you're in good hands with what's going on here. If you're paying a premium, we got you covered. But in reality, when that time comes for coverage, it's a whole nother story. We have to interpret now if you have coverage. We have to see how it applies now if you have coverage. But not once did they say we have to interpret how this payment is going to be applied to your policy, or we have to interpret, how much of this we're going to allocate if you have a loss. That's not what they say. That payment is a monthly payment. You get a contract / policy saying this is what I'm entitled. Even if it's the lowest of the policy, you still got a contract, and they don't take to that contract. One of my pushes today was several violations of the California Fair Claims Act, the Unpractice Act of 709.003H, where it starts. And it's just, there was probably 6 different violations in there of how they, conducted the investigation in timely manners, or, again, misleading information and misrepresentation of what's coverage is that you're telling the insurer. They should be held accountable for some of these things. And in the state of California, misrepresentation of coverage and claim information can get an adjuster in trouble. A lot of trouble in this state. It can get them sued, added on there. So, you know, between understanding your rights in the policy, reaching out to some expert other than accepting what it is, and say, whether I go to a public adjuster that is actually an estimator, not someone who hires an estimator, or go to someone that's actually an estimator that understands insurance, not to mention, and have them check it. There's no way a consumer can check it. They couldn't check this price guide list that we got. Unfortunately, they don't have the program to check it, but we can check it. And it's unfortunate that we're seeing it in multiple states now that this is going on. We go reduce the cost because can't nobody see it. I mean, we've come to that now. We went from not paying you to now when we got to pay you, we go reduce the cost. I mean, and you don't know. And some people really it hurts them in so many ways where they just can't move forward, or they feel like they stuck. And that too gets to be, and I know we talk about estimates being too low. And before we kind of sign off for this one, this kind of addresses another piece of this if it's too low. When we talk about some options here, what about the option of coming out of pocket yourself and doing the repairs? And so let me throw that question at you, Mr. Locke, before we sign off on this. So if my estimate is too low, and I just know I have no way of proving it's too low. I've had all these other estimates that saying, estimate A, B, and C is 10, 15% higher each time up, going up the chain. So it's just higher. What do I do? And I got some money myself and I can't live like this and keep my family like this. What if I myself pay for the repairs? It's not my responsibility to finance my loss, but I have to move forward. What happens if I pay for the repairs and the estimate too low?
It's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot. On one side, we hear experts telling us, well, they started their repairs, so all we owe them is the actual cost that they spent. Never mind the fact that the carrier ignored all the obligations to pay. They put in open items or uncertain items or low items, and that it would never in the world restore you. And yet, that's all the money they're willing to pay. And what we're hearing from counsel is, well, that's on them. They started the repairs. Well, they have to move themselves forward. And that's a sticking point that we have with council saying that to us. Other councils say no, they have to get themselves moved along, but it's they should not have been shortchanged. That we go for what they should have been paid for, regardless of what they actually did, because they were compromised, and they were
Right.
compromised not to do everything. And quite honestly, I've seen that actually in appraisal. I saw that in appraisal where the appraisal panel was not paying attention to what the homeowner had to do just to get themselves back to a enclosed envelope and be able to heat and cool it. They said, this is what we're seeing for photos, this is what we're seeing for standards of requirements, and they just simply moved past the idea that, oh, what did you spend? That was never a concern for three very senior estimators. One was the umpire, two were appraisers. They just rode right past that and said, nope, they're owed for what they're owed at the time of the loss, and we need to estimate that. So there's a great deal of diversity. I've seen, like you have, clients that have good resources, and they just simply say, I'm going to give them a bill. And when I'm done, I'm going to give them a bill. That's what I spent, and they're going to pay it. I mean, you've seen a guy say exactly that, and it was not a small house, and it was not a small amount of money. He just like,
Mhm.
I'm just going to do it, and they're going to pay me. And there is no right answer here, but I think the best answer is going to be, you're going to tell your carrier that whatever you're going to do, you're going to keep them informed, and you're going to keep them up to date, and you're going to tell them why they're deficient, and you're going to say that this is not a closed file, and we're coming back to revisit this, but I'm not going to be held hostage to you.
That's just what needs to be done. Well, we've had a great segment today on your estimate is too low and where to look. So we're going to have our word for today. As Mr. Locke, you have the floor.
Word of the day is read. The word of the day is if you believe something to be true, it's likely true, and don't try to be convinced that this is how it is. This is normal. This is typical, because as we're finding out here, nothing is normal or typical. It's just what can get done to close a file. So if it's too low and you think it's too low, then likely you're absolutely right. Trust yourself. Go with your first mind.
That is so true in this business. Well, we appreciate everybody for joining us tonight on Claims Underground. This is a great topic that we can continue to go on for on and on and on and on, but we got to sign off tonight. We appreciate everybody for coming to join us tonight. And as of now, Troy Willis signing off.
Corey Locke signing off. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks for listening to the Claims Underground podcast. We hope you enjoyed this segment. If you need more information on insurance policies, feel free to check out our website, www.claimsunderground.com. And remember, when the insurance companies won't pay, we're here to help. Until next time.